Hans and Sophie were executed by guillotine on February 23, 1943. They had hoped there would be a massive revolt among the students, one that might unsettle the foundations of the regime itself. There was not. Only a terse headline in a Munich newspaper commemorated their deed: just punishment of traitors to the nation at war. And on the very same day that the Scholls were arrested, Germans poured into Berlin's Sportspalast to hear Joseph Goebbels' infamous total war speech, where he asked those assembled, "Do you want total war? If necessary, do you want a war more total and radical than anything that we can even imagine today?" Their answer was a resounding yes. That war would continue for another 2 years, largely unhindered by the efforts of these two idealists. The ending of this passion story then seems bleak. After all, the traditional passion narrative teaches us that righteous suffering is ultimately vindicated, doesn't it? But where is the vindication here? Where is the triumph? What was it all for? It seems theirs was a crucifixion without a resurrection. Or so we're tempted to believe. But then I look to the end of the Gospel of Mark, the first of the 4 canonical Gospels to be written. Mark gives us a startlingly different picture of Jesus' death and resurrection than the later writers. So startlingly different, in fact, that the later scribes appended endings to Mark to harmonize it with the other accounts. But based on the manuscript tradition, biblical scholarship suggests that the original ending of Mark is at chapter 16, verse 8. The story goes as follows. Jesus, abandoned by the 12, has died on the cross, uttering his final words, the famous recasting of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" His body is laid to rest in a tomb, and a stone is rolled in front of the entrance. After the Sabbath, a group of women disciples go to anoint his body. But when they arrive at the tomb, they find the stone rolled away from the doorway. Inside is a young man dressed in white who tells them that Jesus has been raised from the dead. He instructs the women to go tell the disciples, who will then see the risen Jesus in Galilee. The final verse proclaims, "So the women went out and fled from the tomb, for fear and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." That's it. Mark leaves the reader in a state of anticipation, awaiting the resurrected Jesus. We don't get to see the gospel preached far and wide. What we do see are failed disciples and an utterly alone Jesus. Who then carries the good news forth? Mark's gospel leaves it up to us, the readers, to keep the message of hope alive. Mark does not seek to comfort us so much as challenge us. The gospel seems to confront its readers directly, saying, the 12 deserted him. The women at the tomb deserted him. What will you do? Maybe this can provide a clue to the significance of the Scholls' resistance. They may have been rejected by their own people. Their words may have gone unheeded in their own time. But those words seem to stretch across time, forcing each of us to confront the very same question. What will you do? When they wrote the words, "The white rose will not leave you in peace," they did not speak only to their fellow Germans. They spoke to anyone willing to understand that crucifixion was not a singular historical event in the remote past. It is a persistent reality of the human condition that continues to the present day. So, if we are to salvage any scraps of hope from this passion narrative, we must create it for ourselves. It is incumbent on us to recognize the injustices, the crucifixions that are being perpetrated in our time. It is we who must have the moral courage to ask ourselves whether we stand with the persecuted, with the persecutors, or with the bystanders. This process of self-confrontation can never be perfect. It will never be complete. But perhaps by embracing the challenge, the spirit of the white rose can be raised up out of history.